How many of you have also had the not so pleasant experience of being treated disrespectfully at work, right? And by the way, this is a very safe environment. If that person is in the auditorium today, I would ask that you not stare at them. You know that he's the reason this guy's up here, don't you? Think about this. If I were to ask you to think about a time you were treated with respect or a time you were treated with disrespect, which ones do you think would come to mind more quickly? The disrespectful times. Our brains are actually wired to remember disrespect, not only more accurately, but more quickly. Why do you think that is? Say that? Because it happens more often. Yes, and I was looking for a different response, but maybe that's part of it. Why else? What? Say that? It's painful. And think about this. Remember, what's the number one job of my brain? To keep me what? Safe. Any experience, which means the person that it came from also, right? Any experience that either injures me or even threatens me immediately gets sent to long-term storage so that I can recognize it and avoid it in the future. And we must remember this as leaders and supervisors. If our style of leading people or supervising them causes them to feel damaged or threatened in some way, that's what they're always going to remember first. And then what's going to be the result? What is the likelihood that we'll ever get their best efforts at the job that we've asked them to do? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So disrespect comes in many forms also. It could be bullying. It could be passive-aggressive. It could be threatening, intimidating people. It could be gossip and rumors. It could be excluding people or withholding information that they need to be successful. There's so many things, nasty things that people could do around each other. Here's what it boils down to. Disrespect is shown by actions or behaviors that damage or weaken another person's sense of well-being or their connections to the community that supports them, to the organization that supports them. Anything that we do to try to make that person feel alone and isolated, that's disrespect, plain and simply. And the effect is, in some cases, severe. Just as we had with respect, there's a chemical response to this. When I am treated with disrespect, what it does is it actually triggers what we call the fight or flight circuit. And the fight or flight circuit was intended to keep us safe from existential threats like saber-toothed tigers and marauding tribes and woolly mammoths who were stampeding, whatever it was. But that same mechanism activates in the presence of workplace disrespect. And here's what happens. Cortisol and adrenaline, they persist because my brain's wired to keep me safe, they actually persist longer in the brain than do the good stuff, the good chemicals. In fact, a single severe incident of disrespect. By the way, how many of you have ever gone home and had trouble falling asleep at night because of something that happened at work? Right? We try to take it to bed with us, and our brains are still mulling it over and over. A single incident of disrespect in the chemical response of cortisol and adrenaline, that may actually persist for up to 3.5 hours in my body. Okay? So it takes a person like you or me literally out of our productive mode for about a half a day. But wait, there's more. If you order by noon, but then think about this too. Think about this. Even after that initial incident happens, you hear their voice coming around a corner. And what does your brain immediately do? Warning, warning, danger, Will Robinson, right? Or even if somebody says something that triggers that experience and it releases that same chemical cocktail again. And so that one incident, if left unaddressed, it may cause days worth of lack of productivity from us. That's how damaging disrespect can actually be. And so we look at this, what are the consequences? Well, first of all, we stop really caring about the company that we work for. Work for us becomes purely transactional. Am I here to make a difference? No, I'm here to get my paycheck. How many of you know people like that? They're just here to get a paycheck, right? But if we don't focus on treating each other with respect, that's likely what happens. Another thing is we are much more prone to stress-related illnesses. So think about this. Stress, especially stress caused by my feeling unsafe in the environment that I'm around by other people, that cortisol response, it actually does a couple nasty things when it becomes a day-to-day occurrence. See, in the old days of saber-toothed tigers, stressful situations didn't happen all that frequently. Maybe once or every other week or something, we were challenged by a saber-toothed tiger. But the situation was over in 5 minutes, right? You either had lunch or you were lunch. One of the two. That was it. But the problem with today's workforce is if someone was disrespectful to me yesterday, there's a good chance they may do it today and another. So we have this long-term dosing of cortisol around each other. And what cortisol actually does in long-term dosing is it corrodes our cardiovascular system. It actually causes microabrasions on our blood vessels, which then scar over and become magnets for plaque and cholesterol. So we're literally becoming ill around each other if we treat each other with disrespect. But there's an even more, what I think is an even more dangerous byproduct. Long-term exposure to cortisol actually makes us stupid. It actually weakens the connections, the synaptic connections between the neurons in my brain, and if happening long enough, it can actually kill brain cells. Yeah, that's even better. So we get physically compromised and stupid at the same time. Isn't that great? Let me ask, best show of hands, how many people in here have ever left a place of employment because of the way you were being treated? Okay? Look around this room. It's not an uncommon thing. And I'm going to imagine that hopefully when you got to a better place, sometimes it takes a few weeks, sometimes it can take a few months, but your old self gradually comes back online. But it took getting out of that toxic environment first. Disrespect is toxic to our brains and literally kills us and makes us impaired up here. That's how dangerous it is. Another thing is that we're much more prone to make mistakes and absenteeism, people calling in sick. Why do you think people are more likely to call in sick in a disrespectful organization? How many of you, now, Stephanie said this morning she woke up, I kind of had a cold, but you still showed up today, right? How many of you have woken up and had those mornings where you weren't feeling great, but you weren't all that sick? And so you had to make a decision, right? And your brain starts thinking, who am I working with today? Yeah, I'm probably, in fact, this might be a 2-dayer. I can feel it. That's what our brains do. So we're more prone, and we make more mistakes because we're distracted. We have above average employee turnover. And when people leave an organization voluntarily, which caliber usually go? The good ones or the not so good ones? How come the good ones leave? Because they can. Think about it. If I had a good resume and I knew it, why in the world would I want to stick around someplace where I wasn't being treated very well, right? I call it information constipation. People start doing this with information, right? How many of you have ever seen people doing this, withholding things that somebody else needs to do their job or do their job well, right? They start calculating, well, what am I going to get for this if I share this with you? Ooh, I better not share this. I might get in trouble myself. It really slows down the transfer of vital information. Customer satisfaction takes a hit, and at the end of the day, we become much less productive but also less resilient, all because of that very different chemistry